You know, I'm doing all three of these tapes on a single day, back to back, one after another. I don't always wear the same clothes, and if I'm a little less animated at this last one, you'll understand that I'm running out of steam just a little bit here. This is the third lecture in the series for the weekend college class, and this one will concern the unit of the Exodus. And when we're talking about the Exodus, when we're using the term Exodus, we could mean one of two things, and I will try to distinguish which one I mean. We either mean what I will call, for shorthand, the Exodus event, which is something that happened in the historical memory of Israel when the Israelites were delivered from Egyptian slavery and brought through the body of water, divided, and the Pharaoh's army was destroyed. Talk more about that in a few moments. The other meaning for the word Exodus is the book of Exodus. And I'm going to concern myself roughly half and half with the Exodus event and the book of Exodus in the context of the remaining parts of the what's called the Torah, which is the first 5 books of the Bible. Genesis is the first book of the Bible, and now we're going to cover today in this tape an overview of the other 4 books. In class and for most of your reading assignments, we're going to be focusing primarily on the Exodus event and the book of Exodus. By way of introduction, I want to read the introductory portion of the 10 Commandments, which is found in Exodus chapter 20. If you have the Oxford Annotated Edition, it's on page 95. And chapter 20 is the 10 Commandments, or at least one of the versions of the 10 Commandments. We see an alternate version, slightly different, in Deuteronomy, the 6th chapter. But in Exodus 20, this is the way the 10 Commandments is introduced. Verse 1, "Then God spoke all these words. I am Yahweh, your God, who brought you out of the land of Egypt, out of the house of slavery. You shall have no other gods before me." And then it goes on. And what I want to focus in on right now, we'll be doing some stuff on the 10 Commandments later, but what I want to focus right now is the self-identification of Yahweh. When Yahweh identified himself to Moses at the burning bush, that's in Exodus chapter 3, he said, "I am the God of your ancestors, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob." But here, when Moses is about to cut a sacred covenant between Israel and Yahweh, Yahweh identifies himself, and he says, "I am the God who brought you out of the land of Egypt, out of the house of slavery." This is the way God identifies himself. And what do we conclude from that? We conclude that this Exodus event, that is the deliverance of the Israelite people from slavery, does constitute the most important thing that Yahweh ever did for them. It becomes the defining moment in the faith of Israel. Comparable, I might point out, to the Easter event, the resurrection of Jesus for the Christians. As Easter and the resurrection is for Christians, so Exodus and the deliverance of the Israelites from Egyptian bondage are to the Israelites. And to this day, it remains the most important defining moment for the Jewish religion, celebrated at the great Jewish feast of the Passover. So that's my introduction. I'm going to begin by going over a basic outline of the contents of the remaining portion of the Torah, that is the books of Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy. We don't have any reading assignments outside of the book of Exodus, but I want you to have a general idea of what's in them. Then, for the latter part of this tape, I'm going to be covering 2 particularly important religious practices which are initiated in the book of Exodus, and that will constitute the third tape and the last one that I'm doing today. Okay, first, an outline of the contents. And I'm not so much interested, in fact, I'm not at all interested in you kind of memorizing what's in each chapter, or even I would never envision asking you a question about what are the chapters that have the Exodus event in them. That's not the way I govern the class. But I want you to have a basic idea of what's in the first half of Exodus and what's in the second half of Exodus. And that's about as far as the detail will go. And Exodus does, in fact, break up rather nicely into two different sections. The first section constituting the Exodus event, and that will roughly go from chapters 1 through 19. And then, beginning with the Ten Commandments, we have what I'll call the law, which would be chapter 20 to the end of the book. I don't remember how many chapters Exodus has. I suppose I could look that up right now. Exodus has 40 chapters, so we'll say 20 through 40. So you can see it's roughly split in half. And the Ten Commandments, which is found in chapter 20, is the dividing point. And the Ten Commandments and the legal material that follows, and there are some things that happen in 20 to 40. Should have written 4 there. There are some things that happen. There are some narratives. But for the most part, what we have here is legal material in the frame of a narrative where Yahweh is giving these laws to Moses to bring down to the Israelites